Hi Carys, welcome to the Project 70. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Can you tell us your name and a bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. My name's Carys and I'm a ceramicist living in Thornlands. And I actually grew up in Cumbria. So going back, kind of growing up as a child in a little village, middle of nowhere, in kind of a farming community where people were really predominantly either farmers or artists. So my mum was an artist, we were surrounded by just that kind of idyllic childhood really, and there was always something on the go, whether it was collecting sheep wool and dyeing it with natural dyes, or batik, or making paper, or whatever else. There was always something going on. So when I finished school, going to do an art degree was a really kind of straightforward thing that was always going to happen. So I did my printmaking degree in York, and then kind of realised it's like, okay, so what do I do now? Did my teaching certificate in Cardiff and then moved to Liverpool with my first teaching job. Having the teaching was great, but it wasn't for me. And I met my husband and we had kids, and then we actually emigrated when they were 3 and 1. So I think I only taught for about 18 months and then kind of straight into other things all the time. I always would have a project on the go or be making or doing something. When we emigrated, it was a definite kind of, you've got to make it work. Like, emigrating's tricky. And we moved over we actually hadn't been to Australia before. We just did it. Neither of us had jobs. A 1 and a 3-year-old, some suitcases and a little bit of furniture in a container, but we really didn't bring that much. And we just sold up in the UK and came and thought, well, if we don't like it, we don't have to stay. We moved to Sydney initially because we just thought it's a good fluid job market. My husband's an engineer, teacher, so I got a teaching job kind of within probably the first 6 weeks. We both had work and I was just doing a bit of casual teaching. Sydney was great, but I'm not a city girl. I can't live in a city. My husband will always work in a city. So we always have to have that balance of, he needs the city base for working. I don't really like having neighbours. I grew up where there was only 10 houses in the village. It wasn't even like a proper village. So we always have to have that balance with where we're living to kind of tick the boxes for both of us. So when we were in Sydney, we actually looked, all around Sydney, Wollongong, Newcastle, Canberra, Melbourne, all over. And then we came to Brisbane to have a look and we were like, yeah, this is it, this is good. And driving around Brisbane, we kind of found somewhere on the north side, somewhere kind of out Kenmore way. And then we came to Cleveland and we just drove out of the city and just kept going. And we ended up on a Sunday afternoon in the Grand View. The kids were like, there was ladybirds on the little bushes. They were collecting ladybirds and we were like, right, this is it. This is where we're going to live. And coming from looking around Sydney, we couldn't believe that we could actually live here, price-wise compared to Sydney and all of that. So my husband started looking for work and we moved up here 14 years ago. So we've been in the Redlands a long time actually. And we were lived in Cleveland initially, and my eldest started grade 1 in Thornlands and had a fabulous time, and then they moved across to Ormiston College a bit later, and in that time I started a direct selling business. So I started working with Intimo, and really it was just the flexibility because we had no family support, and my husband working in Brisbane. I kind of had to have my work. I had to be home. I had to be a stay-at-home mum, but I still had to earn an income. So I was with Intimo for 13 years and it was fabulous. And I built the biggest team in Queensland, one of the biggest teams in the company. It really worked so well for us as a family and kind of set us up with what we could do. And as it was building, probably about 10 years ago, I started going to a ceramics studio because the kids were getting older and it's like, right, I can start to get more creative again. And went to a studio, Clay Precinct in Wellington Point, and just going once a week to the studio. And then probably about 2016, I think it was, where I thought, right, let's start to do this properly. I got a wheel at home, started to learn how to throw so that I dictated to the clay what it was going to be, not the other way around, and just getting that technical skill right. So when I was learning to throw, I actually, to reduce the variables, I'd use the same weight of clay each time I threw. And I was starting to get messages from people wanting to buy things, but I kept saying no, no, no. Didn't open the door of anyone buying things until towards the end of 2017, when lots of people were asking. So I thought, okay, I probably should start to say yes to some things, because I kind of knew that as soon as I started to open that door to having a creative business, that it wasn't just going to open a little bit, it was going to go big. And I'm quite full on, like when I did Intimo, I was full on with that, and I knew I couldn't do both of them to the, extreme capacity without me falling to pieces. So it got to the point where I kind of knew that in saying yes to selling my work, it was going to be a tipping point where I was starting a new phase and starting something new. So over 2017, gently, because I'd been throwing the same weight of clay, I was making a lot of cups, and that was really almost like a pianist would do scales. To me, the cups was like that was getting my skill set up, really getting my technical ability better, and I didn't want to start selling things until my technical ability was at the point where I was really confident to have my name placed on something. So I started I used Instagram a little bit like a sketchbook for myself, just to record what I was doing, keep in touch, and I started getting lots of messages on Instagram of people wanting to buy things, cafes wanting me to make them things, and I started saying yes, and it built and built and built. And 2018, I was doing both Intimo and ceramics, and it got to the point where I knew with Intimo I was leading a big team. There was I had about 150 people in my team, so it was a lot of responsibility for others, and I didn't want to not do justice to that position. So I actually sold my Intimo business the end of last year, and that gave me the ability to focus on my ceramics, but it also gave me that cash flow to start a new business without the pressure, because any new business, it's tough and it's tricky, and particularly having a creative business and turning it into an income, or being an artist and it being your full-time income, they're not things that normally go hand in hand. But I knew that I'd been running the business for 13 years, so I knew I just needed to apply some of those principles to my ceramics and actually treat it like a business, not like a hobby, for it to then generate the income of a business. So it's been this last year has been a whirlwind really of getting things sorted, of working out kind of the branding. I had packaging designed by a local company, Le Fin. With the travel cups, they became kind of one of the main products that I was making, because that was the tricky thing as well, is being an artist. You kind of go, okay, that's great, but you can't wholesale things. You need a product. So what's like a clear product that people can then go, yes, that's, something you can duplicate, something that people are going to order. So because I was sending out so many of the cups, I found that I was using so much packaging to post them, to get them there safely. With the cups, I was donating. With me, it's important for it to be more than it can't be just the cup, it's got to be more. So I donate to One Tree Planted for each cup that leaves the studio. To date, we have planted over, let me get this right, it's over 50 football fields worth of reforestation through the cups going out. So I'm so excited by that, and the plan is that's going to be, we're going to build the numbers a lot from there. But what I didn't want is planted a tree, but using 10 trees to post it. That just wasn't good. So I thought if I got packaging designed that was bespoke, so that it showcased the product to sit on the shelf, but also made it safe to post. So that's where working with Lefin, and I did all the drawings and all the illustrations to go on the packaging, and they designed these amazing boxes that we could then post them out. So that was a real that was a game changer as well, in having a brand with a clear voice, making it bigger than just me making things as well. And then as well, it meant that we could, I wholesale to a lot of stores. I've got a number of stockists in America that I send things to as well. So we're kind of having this, getting the word out there and having a clear product through. And then I also have wall hangings and, do tableware and pieces for cafes and restaurants and things as well. So it's kind of making it that bigger picture. And then kind of more recently, it's been, okay, wholesaling into stores and things is fabulous, but I want to make big statement pieces, and I want to have, you've got to have to me it's important that you've got to have an income coming in, because I have to contribute to the family household. That's really important to me, and having the cups and having those pieces does that. But then I also wanted to be able to create one-off art pieces and statement things, and I want to have exhibitions and have that more typical classical artist side of things as well. So I'm trying to kind of double tier what I'm doing with the production ceramics and then the statement piece ceramics. So I've become a member of the Old Schoolhouse Gallery in Cleveland, and it's actually really good, because it's making me step out of my comfort zone to think, well, what's the theme going to be? What am I going to make? What's the statement behind that piece going to be? Technically, how can I make it more? And at the minute, I'm just trying to throw really big things, just to push myself to go, how much clay can I handle? Because it's really hard. And it's like, to throw a big lump of clay, it's tricky just getting it centered, and so it's been really interesting that's why I love making the cups, because it kind of trains your hands. So you're making the cups, and then suddenly you'll go to throw a bigger bit and you're better at throwing than you were, because you've just been practicing. So that's a really cool, I'm just looking at the wheel, that's just a really cool thing that I'm really enjoying, having that double layer of things. So we're still early days, because it's not even a year since I've been focusing on my ceramics, but it's nice how it's progressing. And being like where we are in the Redlands, it's such a special place. Like, I think people who live here and have always lived here maybe don't realise just what it's got going on. Whereas, we did look at lots of different places to live, and this just ticked all the boxes. So I think having, I want to be able to help put the Redlands on the map as a place, as a cool place to be, and as a a hub for, whether it's the scenery or whether it is the local businesses. There's so many cool local businesses going on that to be part of that community is really exciting, and I want to kind of help elevate that as well.
Cool. So, how old are your children now?
They are 17 and 19. Yeah. So Tommy finishes school in like 6 weeks or something crazy. Jamie's second year uni at QUT.
Yeah. So how are you feeling about your baby finishing school?
Do you know what I did? I got a puppy. So I've set myself up with a new dependent, ready for when the other dependents go.
Yeah.
So I've covered that.
Covered it early.
Covered it early. I thought, nah, we're all good.
So what type of artist was your mum?
My mum is a watercolour painter. Well, in fact, she did a lot of different things. She was she was an art teacher as well, and did a lot of watercolours, like sceneries and birds and flowers and that sort of thing. But also, when she lived in London, she designed the fabric for Marks and Spencer's for their linens and all that sort of thing. So she taught textiles. So she was kind of really multi-skilled, and she still paints. She still exhibits and paints, and
So
Does
do
everything
you
as
feel
well.
growing up in that environment and in that village inspired you now?
Absolutely, and it
what
still does inspire me, because it was such a... So our village had 10 houses. It had an art gallery ran by a Chinese man in the middle of northern England. So that gallery, it had like Bridget Riley, it had so many well-known top artists would come to our little, that wasn't ours, but we claimed it as, you know, the LYC gallery. And we would pretty much go there. We'd get up in the morning, then we'd go, and Lee would have different kids' activities. He always had paper for us. We'd just go and play, and we'd just be up there at the gallery so much. And I know that has influenced me so much. And a lot of my mum's friends, there were so many artists, and Mum would exhibit with a group of artists each summer. So the whole of the school holidays, it would be an ongoing exhibition with probably about 15 of them exhibiting together, and we'd just hang out with them. And then in Mum's art department, the people she worked with there, obviously all like teachers but artists as well, and they would get me involved in projects like Malcolm and Rachel Gibson. Malcolm was a printmaker, and Rachel as well, printmaking, and Malcolm would produce a book called Real Art, and he'd do a number of issues over the year, and it was a limited edition book, so maybe 300 in the edition. Everything would be made, they'd put it together, it would be sold in galleries, so it'd be sold in the Tate, it would be sold all over, and they'd get me involved in things like that. So kind of as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, producing work to go in the book that was sold in the Tate, like that was kind of a normal... My normal wasn't normal. That when you look back and go, oh my goodness, that was like the opportunities and things. So I kind of feel like I had art career break to do life, and I'm back in, kind of I feel like I'm stepping back in after almost a 20-year break, and that 20-year break's given me the skill set and I guess the confidence, because you leave uni and you just think, oh, I can't earn money being an artist, but then you know, you kind of do life and all of those things, and think, actually, no, you can make it, you know, you can make whatever you want to do happen. You just have to actually do it. And then having a direct selling business, like the skill set learnt from that is amazing. So
talking about MLM,
I think that's selling. Different. Direct selling, it was like party plan, Intomo's party plan rather than I think it's MLM.
Multi-level marketing.
Yeah, that is more selling one-on-one to the person, and then they sign up and that, whereas Intomo's more the product and the service focus. I think that's, yeah.
So did you ever come across in that field, because obviously it is a place where a lot of stay-at-home mums play with the idea. Did you ever feel any stigma when you first started it, or have people around you and it's started to go like, what?
Yeah.
No, I'm not interested at all, and all of that sort of stuff.
So
How did you overcome that?
I think, especially like, yeah, people would, you know, to go from teaching to doing that, it was looked down on, and even, you know, throughout the whole time, it would always be looked down on. But you kind of go, do you know what? It was more important to me to be home, take my kids to school. If they were ill, I was there. If, you know, I could pick them up from school, I could go to any soccer games, I could drive them to wherever, school holidays I was around. That, to me, was that had far more of a yes than anyone else's opinion to what I was doing. And even when, like, I built a really big business, and it put the kids through private school. It took us on a big overseas holiday every year. It contributed to the family income. It did so much more income-wise than if I'd stayed as a teacher. But still people would go, oh, so what does your husband do? Because you're doing very well. And it's like, you know, so there's that concept that people can't. So I think as well that spurred me on, because direct selling, people always tell you can't make money doing that. So when people say to me, oh, you know, you're never going to make money as an artist, I'm like, oh, watch me.
Because I see so much of that online, and mums trying to find solutions.
Yes.
And it's hard.
And it's hard, and it's working for yourself. It's a very different skill set to being an employee, and it's not for everybody. Like if my team had 150 people in, when I left, at one point there was probably 1,000 people. Do you know what I mean? It's not for everyone, and a lot of people who start direct sales, they're looking for something. That doesn't mean that that's the answer, but you have to be very resilient. And I think in any business by yourself, you have to be resilient to push through and realise that nobody's going to do it for you. And if you actually want to get paid, you have to take the actions. And regardless of what the outcome is, if you keep taking the actions enough, you will get the end result. So it's kind of focusing on the process, not the end result. And realising that it's okay for not everybody to say yes. It doesn't mean that, or it's okay for people to say no. It doesn't mean they hate you. They're just not interested at the minute. And that's okay. So I think you have to, I think it's an interesting thing, and I'm so grateful for having that phase, because it worked so well, that kind of stage in life for us as a family. To have me home but still earning was brilliant. Wouldn't change. And I know that if I wouldn't have been ready to do art sooner. So it's funny how everything just has to happen in layers to build up.
So what do you think the reasoning is why people think you can't make money from art? Because that's a general consensus. Like, that's so many people say that all the time.
I think, I'm still so early days that I think sometimes it probably comes down to a few things, because public perception of, there's so much produced, like there's a place for the likes of Kmart, but nobody can compete with that. And it's cheap, but there's actually a price behind it. There's a lot of things where you shouldn't be able to buy them that cheaply. And it shouldn't be so throwaway. So that's kind of part of what I want to promote as well, is you should have fewer special things, not just this like change it every season because it's cheap and you can, and you're throwing it away, but it's still going somewhere. It's still, I think part of it's having people realise that if somebody's making something handmade, it takes hours, it takes weeks, and that's why it's not $5, it might be $30, it might be $50, it might, whatever the price point is, that's because things have been paid for. Whereas when something's $5, you think, well, how's that produced for that amount, and who's not been paid, or what's the cost will be there, but it could be an environmental cost, it could be a ethical workplace cost. There will always be a cost somewhere. It might not be the monetary cost for the consumer. So I think that mindset's a really society tricky one to change. I think from an individual artist point of view, it's you've got to almost commercialize some of what you do to fit in the niche, to find the niche. And I think having, like, social media is fantastic because it gives you a voice, but it's also such a muddy, crowded field that if you don't have a clear voice and a consistent voice, it's not heard. So I think the marketing behind things is really important, and having that clarity of message about what you stand for. Personally, I think it's really important to be more than just the product. Like, what difference are you making? What impact are you having? If you're not, I know with my pieces, it's like, I didn't want it to just be a cup. I wanted it to be more than that. I wanted it to be a statement about reforestation, a statement about being a really conscious consumer of not just getting the cheap one and then it doesn't matter if you break it, because it actually does matter, and it's not cheap. it's getting paid for somewhere. It might just not be you that's making that difference. So I kind of want to have that, sending the message with, you know, planting the tree, with that kind of taking care of things and having that special piece.
Well, you can feel the difference.
It's just that, you know, you've got a bit of soul that you're giving to somebody. It's not just a mindless thing. And so much, everyone's so busy. It's like when you have something that is handmade, I think it makes you stop and brings you back to the moment, rather than going, did I drink that tea? I think I had a cup of tea. Have I had my coffee today? Because it's just such a mindless action. Whereas when you have something handmade, it draws you into the moment and makes you stop. And I think that's a really important thing, you know, for generally as a society for us to do as well, is to have that, you know, make the conscious choice about what we're buying, where are we putting our dollar, because that's what's fueling what's acceptable as well. And I think having that moment to actually stop and go, you know, pull you back into, there's so much busy, and it's like, well, why are you doing that? What's the need? So I think it's kind of pulling back to that moment.
And you may have an answer to this, but also definitely in the community of creatives that you would know, how do you feel about the big guys like Kmart and Target and how they pull a lot of their product line ideas from one-man band creatives?
Oh, it's so bad. There is, it's, I don't know whether there's ever an answer to it, because it's always happened and it always will happen. And I know a few people who it's happened to, where, you know, a big company wants to collaborate, they really love it, and then it falls through, and then next season they've got all the designs anyway that they've just done. Or I know sometimes where I've had bigger companies approach me to work together, but they're wanting handmade, but at, you know, slipcast production prices, and it's like, well, that's not, you know, you get the excitement of working with the big company, but it's like, no, I'm not going to sell my soul out to work for free just for the honour of being with you, you know. So it's kind of, that's a tricky one, and I think it's never the same anyway. So it kind of doesn't matter, because when people copy, they don't have the soul and the meaning behind it, and they don't have the touch. Like when you're hand making, the form of your hands, nobody else can duplicate that, because they don't have your hands and they don't know why it was made. So you can kind of feel the difference between a soulless piece and a piece that's been made with intent. So it kind of doesn't matter. It's like, let them duplicate, because they can't.
So when you talk about commercialization, how do you stay on trend, or how do you find the trends whilst keeping your feel, your signature?
Okay, so you actually have to be really strict with yourself to not sell out and to stay true. I do get a lot of messages from people asking me to make things, and I do say no to a lot of things, because it's like, I could make that, but I'd hate it, and I don't want to do that. And I always figure, so I have a couple of questions when I'm making something. It's like, okay, if I was on a magazine, so if I'd made this thing, whatever it is, and suddenly it went off and everyone loved it, and I had to be on the front cover of a magazine next to it, would I hate myself, or would I be proud? That's always my thing of, Richard from Clay Precinct always said to me, just be careful what you get known for, because, and you kind of go, that's so true. You want to be known for what makes your heart sing, not what what brings it. Like, it's important to earn money, but it's got to be more than that. You can't sell out for a cheap book or be taken on a tangent of what isn't your style. And it's funny that you will get people sending you pictures of other people's work saying, can you make this? And it's like, no, because that's somebody else's. Like, buy it from them. I'm not going to copy somebody else's work, because that's weird. And I won't be able to anyway, because it's their hands, not my hands. So I think you have to really be strict with yourself to stay true to yourself. But then going back further from that, you actually have to let yourself develop your style and give yourself you've got to be kind to yourself to let that happen naturally, because it might happen over months, it might happen over years, and it's going to develop through. And I think you have to just let that flow, and you can't rush it. So I think and it will always evolve, but yeah, I think you have to kind of know what's your influence and what do you stand for. And then if you're true to that, it's actually really easy to say yes or no to things. And I think if you have a clear voice, you draw in the people who are your people, rather than trying to cater for everybody, because that's what Kmart does. They cater for everyone. It's bland. It's very, it's your vanilla thing where they say, this is what's fashionable, and people go, great, let's change the living room to what's fashionable. Whereas you want the people who, they know what's cool and they know what they like, and they don't care what's in fashion, because that's irrelevant to them, because they're so deep rooted in what is right to them. And then you just have to let them find you. That's, yeah.
So what's your so you're doing something that you love right now, and that's an amazing place to be, especially when your last child's about to finish school. What was it like to bring up the two boys in the Redlands?
Really good. Really, really good. It was, what I like about here is they have the freedom. It's a community where you tend to know a lot of people, and there's a lot of crossover. So, if you've got a kid in school who maybe does soccer and swimming lessons, you're ticking a lot of boxes for a lot of different schools to know a lot of different people. Add into that, I was doing probably 4 Intimo bookings a week. You know everybody. So it was, and like when Jamie moved from Thornlands to Ormiston, it was so nice that I already knew some people who had kids in Ormiston, so they organised play dates before he even moved school, so that he knew people. And I think that sort of, it's got that small town feel where people will invite you around, and they will know you, and you're out walking and people do stop and say hello and have a chat and support a lot of the businesses know each other as well. And I always liked that they could bike, like with all the cycle paths, they could bike all over the Redlands without having to go on roads. That was a big thing to me as a mum of 2 boys who were just out, in that they could, it was like, yep, you can get there. You don't have to cross the big road. And they've got Straddy on their doorstep. My youngest and his mates will go over there and go camping, and they camp, they fish, they hang out, and that's idyllic. Like, to have that as a hangout place growing up, and it's so easy, and it's just there. Just jump the ferry and over you go, and you've got that on your doorsteps. Amazing. And when they were younger, I would only let them go to Coochie, and then when they got older, they could go to Straddy, but that was their starter island. But yeah, you just think how brilliant's that to have localies. And then you've got Brisbane on your doorstep for universities and all that sort of thing. But yeah, this is a good place to be.
And where's your favourite place in the Redlands?
Oh, I'd have to say my house. I am a little homebody who, if I don't have to leave my house, I'm so happy. Hence why I've always had a home-based business. But so it is, it's my house. And I love it here because we've got the mangroves over the road, and it's I do like Oyster Point as well. If I had to choose somewhere that wasn't my house, where you're kind of there and you're looking across across there, that would be across the bay there. And up at the lighthouse is nice, but then you've got loads of people up there, so that's different. And I like Cleveland. Cleveland's a cool little centre.
Awesome. And Do you have any advice you'd give to somebody who wants to start their own creative business?
Oh, yeah, I would, it's generally a pen and paper job of sit down and work out what is it you want, because it might be that, you know, for some people, the pressure to make for money takes away the enjoyment. And if that means it's not right for you to do as a business. Within the creative business side of things, it's working out, what do you want to do? Do you want to make things yourself? Do you want to teach other people to make things? Because that's a very different thing. Like, people often ask me if I'm going to do classes here or classes wherever, and it's like, it's such a different thing to teach somebody than to create yourself. And I think once you're teaching other people, just energy wise, it's hard to then create your own things. So I think working out exactly what you want and then having a really strategic plan as to what are the steps to make it happen. Because so many, you know, starting a business is fun, it's exciting, it's all of those things, but you want it to work as well. So you have to kind of work out how, you know, what are your avenues for your sales? How are you going to promote? Who's your client base and how do you find them? And how are you going to interact with them? And what message are your pieces going to convey when you're not standing next to them? That's why it was really important for me to get the packaging made, because once they left me, I wanted them to still have the story and tell that tale. So, you know, for me, that was a really important thing, whereas for other people that wouldn't be relevant. So I think it's really knowing what works for you. What are you willing to put into it? Because I think starting any business, you have to know that you are handing your soul over to make it work. And you've got to be cool with that. And I think some people are really good working for themselves and some people are really good as an employee. And it's knowing which one's you. You know, are you prepared to be on 24/7, or do you want to just clock on, clock off? Because with your own business, you don't clock on and clock off. It is, you know, it is an essence of you and an extension of you. So I think it's really good just to accept that and be okay with that and know that that's what it takes, I think. And then you just got to put in the hard yards.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we're all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the project. We look forward to sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.